Are you grinding? Are you taking no days off? Do you really, really want to be successful more than anything else in this world? Because it would definitely define your life and make you important and better than everyone else. Well, you're in luck because today's episode, we're talking about the brutal truth about success no one talks about. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. What's going on, Danny?
What's up, Rudy? You know what's funny about this topic
Hmm.
is that I think our conception of success is so effed up completely, and it leads to horrible outcomes. And yet, I think there's a part of everyone that kind of wants it,
Hmm.
because at the same time, it's like you can't help but everywhere you fucking look, you're getting an affirmation of that conception of success over and over sold to you. So it's like this constant tension between I thought about this a lot. When we were younger, like when I was in high school, I think most people, when they thought of like their life, they wanted like a big house, they wanted a nice car. And then as I got older and matured, I was like, I don't really want any of that. Like, I don't want, that's not what I want. And it took a long time to really realize what I really wanted as like my conception of a good life. And then I thought about it, it's like, man, how many people actually sit and think about what they actually really want versus like what they think they want because of everything they're told daily by ads, by social media, by the news, by all this bullshit and talking heads. And do they even know like so then because if you don't know what you want, dude, you're gonna get that and be miserable. If you do get it, or you're not gonna get it and you're gonna be miserable because you didn't get what you thought was gonna be better.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we want it because we think our life will be better. If we get success, then our life will be better. But arguably, you can't make your life better because the only life you have is what you have right here, right now. And the only way that
Yeah.
that can be better is that just by being here right now. But I was actually thinking about this week. Was like our concept of success is totally black or white. It's all or nothing thinking. Where
Yes,
it's like
100%.
either you're a success or you're a failure. And it's like, okay, fine. If that's true, where's the cutoff? Like, what dollar amount do you need to be a success? Oh, no, no, no. It's not dollar amounts. Like, you need to do all this stuff. You need to be like, so,
Yeah.
and it's like, fine, be specific. Like, tell me specifically what you need to be successful. Well, you need a Twitter account with this many people. And it's just like, it's so vague and arbitrary that it's one of those things that people just end up chasing their whole entire life and then never feeling like they made it.
Yeah. And the funny thing is none of those things actually matter anyway. Like, look, a social media account with a
Well,
lot of
not to
followers.
you.
Yeah, yeah, right. I guess that's true. Not to me. But my point was like it's funny because our whole conception of success too is like, you know, Aristotle said like we should never base eudaimonia on externals. So flourishing can't be conditioned by that because you have no control over it, right? Stoics argue this too. Lots of philosophers have made this point. That your good life can't be contingent on externals because you don't have any control over that. And everything about our notion of success is tied to externals, right? It's tied to recognition. It's tied to, likability or fame or whatever, however you want to phrase that, to wealth. Nothing we really have direct control over. And I think that's really interesting too, because it's like this setup for a miserable life.
Yeah. Well, it's also interesting the way that you put it on these external, like our happiness and our flourishing depends on these externals because by definition, externals are things that do not belong to you. They're not part of you. So
Yeah.
how could you, if happiness exists outside of you, that means you'll never be happy just by
Yeah.
definition.
Yeah. If that's your conception of happiness. Yeah. And I think that's the messed up thing is that I think in the modern world, because we made everything just about one thing, about money, we've really diminished human quality of life in a lot of ways. And we've made it hard for people to realize that they can be happy almost at any time. And sad sometimes. I mean, I don't think they're going to be happy all the time. That's absolutely not true. Like, I think that's a bad idea of happiness too. But you can be happy really at any point. You don't
Five
have to
days a
have any
week.
of this other stuff. Yeah, right? You
Yeah.
don't have to have any of this other stuff. None of it really matters. It all just depends on what value you put into it and like what you make of it rather than like letting other people make it for you. But I think that's the hard part.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes down to your thinking. So like
Yeah.
for a long time in my life, I thought that I'll be happy when fill in the blank. And then I recognized that that didn't work because I filled in the blank and still wasn't happy. And so it's one of those things that you start to notice the thoughts that are leading you astray and down the wrong path and things like that. And then Well, then you can just be happy with whatever.
Yeah, I thought you were getting choked up for a second. I was like, man, this is getting real.
I am getting choked up.
But the
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy too, because like I think it's funny because like people idolize these people with a lot of money and stuff, but you're seeing such one small aspect of their lives, and it's very controlled. They have PR teams. They have people writing scripts for them, escorting them around so they say the right thing at the right time, and they wear the right thing, and they give the right look of not too much effort, right? And all this BS. And like the reality is like most of them are workaholics. None of them are content because look, especially look at like the ultra wealthy in this country that have hundreds of billions of dollars. There's no point doing anything anymore. They're not getting any value. Like the more they work, the value they're getting from that work is so little compared to the whole because
It's
they can't even
actually
spend
it's
the money they
actually by
have.
definition wasting their life
Yeah,
because
literally.
yeah, they're spending time working when they don't need to.
Yeah, they could be doing any other thing. They could have hobbies, but they don't. That's the thing. They don't have any of that. And they're trapped in this cycle now too of like, what is their comparison? Well, somebody else is always gonna have more money than you, or could always have more money than you. So now they're just in this competition for nothing. And look what it takes to get there. How many lives have they ruined? How many, horrible decisions have been made because of them? And it's like, really, is that what you want?
You know, you just reminded me of the Marcus Aurelius quote I think it's in like the 10th book or something of the Meditations, where he's like, anything that you want in life by some circuitous route, you could have it right now. If you just, I forget what he said exactly. It was something like, be grateful, appreciate what you have, act justly, something like that. But yeah, pretty
Think
much
about
that.
death.
Yeah,
Probably.
think
You probably
about
said that
that.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you just appreciate what you have and because most of the stuff you have is stuff at some point you thought getting that would complete your life.
Yeah. Well,
I
I think,
noticed oh,
okay. No, go ahead.
I noticed that recently is I was so we were just talking before the episode how we've both used AI as like a free psychotherapist and it does a phenomenal job. And one thing that I noticed was like I was feeling like all I'm doing so much stuff and it's not good enough. And it's actually like, well, that seems to be the cause of your problems right there is you're doing all of these things and they're not good enough. And maybe you could just change your mindset that like just doing these few things that you enjoy, this is good enough. And it blew my mind because I was like, wait, you mean I don't have to be perfect at everything and like the top best this, that, and the other? And so I just started like focus a few things that I like really enjoy. I was just like every time I do it, I'm just like, you know what, this is enough. Like if I do this, this is enough. And it completely revolutionized like the way that I thought and felt about stuff.
You know what's crazy? I don't know if this will make sense, but like, do you ever think about like, too, like, we have such a narrow perspective on how people live in the world? Because there's been lots of ways people have lived and do live. And what I mean by that is like, think about like,
I saw
there are still,
Waterworld.
yeah, right? Okay, so you saw that where Kevin Costner drinks his own pee right away off the bat. Great,
Yeah.
terrible. It's such a bad movie, dude. You really. Anyway, so like, there's people that are living as monks, in temples, in places, and that's what they do. Their life is very simple. There's people that like live out in like Alaska and stuff and like literally live like off the grid entirely. And there's people that are homeless that wouldn't choose to be otherwise. I mean, there's people doing all sorts of things around the world. And like ask yourself, like, is that life any better or worse than yours? And who are you to judge? Like what makes a monk's life somehow inferior to mine? Nothing. I mean, nothing does. It's a different choice. It's a different set of values. I don't know that I would choose it, but that's probably because of a lot of conditioning and stuff that comes from living in a culture like mine. It makes it hard. But like really, when you think about it, like, and I think this is a good practice, is think about all the different ways people live and ask yourself, like, what is the difference? Is there any ostensible difference? Like, they're not hurting people, they're not causing anybody pain. And if they enjoy it, who cares? What's the difference? Like, and I
Mhm.
think it's interesting because I think we focus so heavily on one thing, one aspect of life, and one way of life is being successful, and we miss so much more and could have such a better life for ourselves and a better present by, thinking for ourselves about this rather than letting society think for us.
I like what you're saying. There's this book, I forget I forget the name of it. Maybe it'll come back sometime while we're talking. But basically,
Yeah, very
the
well.
premise of the book was why positive, oh, it's called The Antidote by Oliver Berkman. Why positive thinking doesn't work. And so basically he goes through the history of positive thinking. And it came like after, I think, World War One, after the Depression, where they realized that like in order to sell stuff, these
Oh yeah.
salesmen needed to be motivated to do stuff. And that's where like the positive motivation type of thing came from. And it's just kind of snowballed into this thing where now it's just like grind, no days off, just, you know, and all this stuff. And it just keeps on going and going and going to like nowadays it's it's easy to be indoctrinated because you think that this is the way that everyone thinks. Like I was talking with a young kid the other day, he was probably like 18 or 20, and he was pretty convinced that like this is the way that the world works because that's what he
Well, you
watches.
see.
Yeah, that's what he
Yeah.
watches on TikTok or whatever, and that's probably what his friends talk about. And he was pretty convinced that like everybody thought this way, and it wasn't possible to think another way.
Yeah. Well, that's the crazy part. There's been studies like there's a connection here, and I'll make it so it'll be a little weird at first. But when they first started, were making arguments for affirmative action back in the day, right? One of the arguments for that was like you need to have people that look like you living different lives so that you can imagine yourself in that life. And then that experience becomes possible. That was one of the good arguments for it. And it made sense, right? Like if I can't see people that look like me doing things, I don't think that's a possibility. And that applies here because like that kid, right? If all you see is one way of life affirmed all the time, because think about it, our view of the world is very narrow. Social media, everything's algorithmically determined. Everything you're getting stuff that just
And
confirms what
it's
you
so
already
hard to
think.
see anything that doesn't fit with what you already think and believe.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter what you search because you're going to get those things are going to keep pushing you into that one narrow path. So it's really difficult, but you have to get out of that because otherwise, it makes sense that that's all he thought, right? If that's all you see, that's what you think the world is like. And I think this has been our biggest like con on ourselves with capitalism and stuff was like we all started to believe that this was the only way possible. And it's not. It's not even the only way to organize ourselves, for Christ's sakes. There's so many other possible societies. Everything's contrived. I mean, it's all just made up. We could do this so many different ways. So, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a really good point. Like, if, and how do you then, I guess, how do you seek out other ways of life to see other examples is hard though nowadays.
Hmm.
You have to like,
Yeah.
uh,
So I think one brutal truth about success that most people don't realize is that it's inherently dissatisfying. I've met a lot of people who are successful and they're miserable. And especially if they're successful in a famous type of way, because then they feel like the weight of the world is on their shoulders and they have to portray this image. And it's crazy because like a lot of outgoing, successful, famous people are really introverts. And
yeah,
so they're putting on this act and it's just like it's like
it's
oppressive and
draining.
it's a weight. And I remember
Yeah.
I met this one social media person who has 6 million followers. And I was talking to them and they were contemplating suicide because life just didn't look good. And by all means, they had uh
What everybody else
ev-
would think of as a crazy
exactly
successful
success. They
life.
had they
Yeah.
had the money, they had the following, they had the fans, they had everything. And life lost its meaning
Yeah. Well, what's crazy too is say you get that fame, a part of you knows that it's gonna go away at some point. I mean, come on, most
after
famous
fame comes
people,
oblivion.
yeah,
Marcus Aurelius.
yeah, and we've talked about this before, but like, dude, when was the last time anybody mentioned Steve Jobs? Really, think about it. Other than me, because I
Yeah.
think I've mentioned him twice in the past few months, but other than me, right? Nobody talks about him, and I think it's funny because like it comes up a lot in my mind though, because like all these people that we think are like they're so important, they matter, dude. When they die in 5 years, no one's gonna give a shit.
Yeah.
There'll be somebody else to focus on. There'll be somebody else to raise up, right? And it's like that fame only lasts so long, and then there's nothing after it. So it's like the same either way. Why does it matter?
Yeah. Yeah, I think Will Smith did such a good job talking about it in his autobiography where he was like, he thought that his life was messed up because he didn't have money. And then he got all the money and his life was still messed up and he was still miserable and he realized it was him. And it's just like, it's eye-opening.
It is, and it makes sense that we all think that, right? Because we're told all the time that the only thing that matters is money. And if you're struggling with money, all your immediate problems are generally going to be related to money. So it makes sense to think, right, that if I solve that problem, everything will be great. I mean, but it's a false connection. It's a correlation, not a causality, right? Like, yeah, you're going to fix those immediate stresses in your life, but that's not going to just make you happy. It's not going to make things better. And in fact, it's going to add a whole lot of other problems to your life that you didn't have before. And I think
Hmm.
that's the other side of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
we
agree.
miss out. It blows my mind though. It's just like I don't know, it's funny how like unimaginative we can be sometimes in terms of like thinking about life and how to live life. And because we're so afraid of going outside the norm that people are just afraid to try things that might actually make them happy, you know?
Yeah. And it's crazy because we want life and we want more life, but really everything that you're going to have is just right here.
Well, yeah, we
So,
only have the moment.
yeah. So like all of it is just you need to find what you're looking for right here.
Well, and the crazy part is too, just add one more thing is like, and I find myself doing this a lot too. Like when you get caught up in grinding, you find it hard to relax. And
Hmm.
then you'll notice like that other things in your life that are good that you have now, you're not even enjoying, you're taking for granted because you're focused on the future, trying to get this stupid thing, right? And I think that's the other side of it that people don't realize is like, yeah, you can do whatever you want if you give up everything else. And it's like, but you're giving up everything else. And that's going to also have consequences as well. So it's like, you have to make these choices that are hard.
Yeah. So it's a tough one. Success can be
Yeah.
great, but you can lose a lot. I would say define it first.
I think we
Maybe
need to redefine success. Yeah. What does
uh,
success look like to you? You know?
yeah, not some broad like, oh, more money, like an exact dollar value. Because the thing is you'll get more money and then it'll be more money and then you'll get business promotions and it'll be a bigger thing. You won't want to
Yeah.
be the CEO, you want to be the billionaire CEO. And it's like it just compounds and it just goes on and on and
Well,
on.
part of it makes sense having goals to work towards, right? Because that motivates us. But they can also become the trap of that's all we're focused on. And we're forgetting that we're human beings with a whole life.
Yeah.
We have relationships, we have downtime, we have all these other things that we should be also, cultivating. And I think we don't when we focus that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And figuring out what is enough for you.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well,
Never enough. It's capitalism.
exactly.
Gotta
Never
keep
enough. You
consuming
need to consume more, buy more.
until
Yeah.
you die.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there you have it, the brutal truth about success that no one talks about. If you have episode ideas you'd like us to talk about, maybe questions, philosophical questions, self-help questions, life questions, well, you can
Any
always ask
question?
us any questions. You can always ask us. You can post a comment down on YouTube or you can email us. The email can be found in the show notes. Until next time, this is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Randy. That's Danny. I'll see you later, Danny.
Later, Randy.